They say you can smell betrayal before it hits, like burnt toast that ain't yours. I smelt it at 7:41 a.m., right after Olivia called, her voice high and trembling. "Elijah, the cabin's on fire. Your grandfather's—" I didn't even grab my keys, just bolted out, barefoot, heart thudding like a warning drum. Laurel Hill sits on a rise above Beaver Creek, and from halfway down the road, I could already see it. Thick black smoke twisting into the summer sky like a funeral flag. But it wasn't the fire that made my blood run cold. It was the purple Lexus SUV pulling away, slow as molasses, with no shame in sight. Only one person in this county drives that ridiculous car with pride. Darlene Whitmore, the HOA queen of Azalea Ridge. The woman who offered to buy my land just yesterday with a fake smile and a checkbook full of lies. I'd said no. Firmly. Politely. Stupidly, as it turns out. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If you love wild, true-feeling stories packed with twists, justice, and just the right amount of HOA chaos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is even more jaw-dropping, and trust me, the surprises coming next, you won't want to miss them. Now here's the thing. Laurel Hill wasn't just land. It was bloodline. My grandfather built that first cabin back in 1967 with nothing but rough hands, borrowed lumber, and a stubborn streak wide as the Tennessee River. When he passed, he left me 5 rickety cabins and one promise: don't let the wrong people take this place. So I didn't. I rebuilt, restored, added 7 new luxury units, made it a retreat people drove 6 hours to reach. All legal, all paid for, all outside the HOA's jurisdiction. And that's what burned her. Darlene's been gobbling up everything around me for the last 3 years, turning cozy country lots into cookie-cutter nightmares with vinyl fences and fake charm. But Laurel Hill? That was the last piece she couldn't touch. When Darlene showed up yesterday, she was dressed like Easter and divorce court collided. Neon pink blouse, lime green heels, and enough perfume to fumigate a barn. Behind her was her yes-man, Dennis, holding a folder thick with plans. "Elijah," she said, with that Botoxed-mouthed grin, "we're offering double market value for Laurel Hill. Azalea Ridge would like to build a community wellness pavilion." I nodded politely. "Is that what the blueprints say? Wellness pavilion?" Because from where I stood, it looked like a 3-story lakeside mansion with private dock access and an indoor wine cellar. Her smile twitched. "Some people don't recognize opportunity when it knocks." I smiled back. "Some knocks come from people trying to steal your door." She didn't like that. She left in a cloud of cheap perfume and thin threats. This morning, she left in smoke. By the time I reached the top of the hill, firefighters were already trying to contain the blaze, but it was too late. My grandfather's original cabin, the one with the hand-carved porch swing, the stone chimney we laid together when I was 12, that was gone. Just blackened beams and glowing coals where a lifetime used to stand. The fire chief gave me the kind of look you reserve for someone who just lost their dog and their home. "We'll investigate," he said. But his voice sounded like someone who knew the politics of this town too well. Olivia stood next to me, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You think it's her?" I didn't say a word. Didn't have to. The answer hung between us like smoke. It was too clean, too quick, too convenient. And just like that, this wasn't about legacy and war. You don't grow up on a hill like Laurel without learning how to fight quiet. We're not the type to throw fists. We throw facts, receipts, deeds, line by line, dotted and signed. And while Darlene thinks she's just burned me into submission, she clearly forgot to ask what I do for a living. I'm not just the guy with the pretty cabins. I'm also the guy who audits HOA finances for the state fund. That's right. The same woman who lit a fire under my home has her name on spreadsheets I've been quietly reviewing for months. Funny how the universe hands you matches and motive. She thinks she's playing checkers, but she just walked into a chess match where I know every square, every move, and every weakness. And I've got the receipts to match the ashes. 2 days after the fire, I got my first HOA violation, which was funny considering I wasn't part of the HOA. The envelope had that unmistakable HOA smugness. Gold trim, scripted logo, and just enough self-importance to make a grown man laugh. Inside, a $250 0-cents fine for excessive tree shade obstructing community cohesion. Not kidding. Apparently my maple tree was casting suspicious shadows on her neighborhood's spiritual balance. Next day, another envelope. This time, unauthorized squirrel feeders encouraging disruptive wildlife behavior. Darlene had clearly declared war, and she was firing citations like a drunk umpire with a grudge. By the end of the week, I had racked up more violations than a frat house on probation. It was like watching bureaucracy cosplay as comedy. And it wasn't even trying to be subtle. But petty only works if the other side plays along. I had other plans. See, Darlene may have had her laminated rulebook and clipboard militia, but she overlooked one key detail. I'm not just Elijah from the Cabin Hill. I'm also Elijah Vance, Senior Compliance Investigator for the Tennessee State Municipal Oversight Fund. Fancy title, yes, but what it really means is I audit HOA budgets for a living. I see where the dollars go when nobody thinks they're being watched. And wouldn't you know it, right around the same time Darlene decided to weaponize lawn care against me, our office received a new round of audit assignments. Azalea Ridge HOA right there in the middle. Coincidence? Maybe. But poetic? Absolutely. I opened that financial folder like a man unwrapping karma. And ooh, did karma come gift-wrapped with a spreadsheet and 7 red flags. The more I read, the more it stank. Landscaping contracts with no invoices, consulting fees with no consultants, security services billed monthly to a company registered to an empty lot in Pulaski County, $75,000 paid to a company called Bluegrass Property Wellness, which, near as I could tell, was just Darlene's cousin running a riding mower twice a year and charging like he was detailing Versailles. It was so bloated it could have qualified for disaster relief. I flagged the most egregious items, submitted them to our internal team for escalation, and kept digging. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was fraud with a garden hat and a southern accent. And the deeper it got, the clearer the pattern became. Darlene wasn't running an HOA, she was running a shell game wrapped in a tulip festival. While I played Connect the Crime behind a desk, Darlene was doubling down on the drama in real time. Signs started appearing at my resort entrance, big red warnings claiming unsafe structures, pending health violations, and do not enter, under investigation. None of it legal, none of it even remotely enforceable, but guests don't know that. They see a big red sign and think I'm harboring black mold and lawsuits. Bookings plummeted, cancellations poured in like rain through a leaky roof. Olivia called crying, said even her sister stopped bringing her kids by the lake because people were talking. Darlene's smear campaign was working, not because it was true, but because it was loud. And in a town like Beaver Creek, loud travels faster than facts. Then came the wind chimes. Yes, wind chimes. I got a notice saying mine were emotionally jarring and in violation of auditory harmony standards. I couldn't make that up if I tried. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch. But laughter turned to steel the minute I saw the fine, $125 0 due immediately. I pinned it on my corkboard right under the hummingbird citation and stared at it for a good while. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my land anymore. This was about power. About a woman who'd never been told no and a man who just became her favorite problem. And if she wanted a fight, I wasn't just going to throw punches. I was going to throw policy, protocol, and proof right through the front door, because when someone tries to burn down your home and fine you for the ashes, you either roll over or you rise up. And I was done rolling. I made a new folder on my laptop, labeled it HOA Karma, and filled it with every violation, every screenshot, every lie I could verify. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation, about dignity, about drawing the line not just with Darlene, but with every small-town tyrant who thinks a title and a fake badge give them the right to destroy lives. And as I stared out over the blackened hill where my grandfather's cabin once stood, I made myself a promise. I would fight her not with fire, but with truth. Not with rage, but with receipts. Because the thing about people like Darlene is, they count on you folding. They expect silence, but they never expect someone who knows the system better than they do. And they definitely don't expect that someone to come with backup. I woke up with glass in my back and spray paint on my truck. Someone had scrawled "hillbilly trash" across the side door in big red letters, like they wanted to leave a calling card and an insult in one swoop. The kicker? They used the kind of paint that doesn't come off easy. Had to be intentional. The store manager at Beaver Creek Grocery pulled the security footage with a sigh, like he already knew how this would go. "Looks like the cameras glitched between 2:00 and 4:00, Aiming," he said, not even trying to fake surprise. But you could still catch a blurry frame of that same purple SUV leaving the lot. Darlene didn't just want to win, she wanted me humiliated, labeled, and pushed so far out of town that even my shadow would stop showing up. And judging by how folks were crossing the street to avoid eye contact, it was working. Nobody wanted to get involved. The man at the diner who used to ask about my fishing cabin suddenly acted like I was contagious. Olivia told me people were whispering that the fire might have been insurance, that I was looking for a payout. I didn't have the energy to fight rumors. I was too busy sleeping in my truck at the edge of the hill, staring at the skeletal remains of the original cabin like it might rise again if I watched long enough. One morning, the sun hit just right and lit up something half buried in the ash. I walked over barefoot and pulled out a melted picture frame, the glass warped, the edges burned. Inside was a photo of me and my grandfather, sitting on that cabin porch with 2 mugs of hot cocoa and grins that could survive winter. I wiped the soot off his face, sat down on the blackened stump nearby, and just existed. Felt smaller than I had in decades. The kind of small that makes you wonder if fighting back is just pride in a nice coat. That's when she showed up. Hazel Whitmore, Darlene's daughter. I knew who she was, of course. Soft-spoken, always had her head in a book, the kind of girl who didn't belong in a family built on threats and petty power. She found me sitting in the ash and said, "You don't know me, but I think you need to see this." Just like that, no introduction, no small talk. She pulled a folder from her backpack, slid it across my tailgate, and looked over her shoulder like she was expecting to be followed. Inside were floor plans, invoices, emails, all addressed to Whitmore Wellness Development Private Use. Not HOA, not community, personal spa, private lake access, staff quarters, even a meditation deck. That's what she's building, Hazel said, eyes down. Not for the neighborhood, for herself. I was quiet, flipping pages, each one a new reason to want to scream. "You're the 4th, she said suddenly. "He's done this before. 3 other properties. Smear campaigns, false violations, intimidation. Burned one down in 2021, ruled electrical. I didn't know what she was doing at first, but now I do." Hazel told me she found the plans by accident, snooping on her mom's laptop. Said her conscience wouldn't shut up. "I can't stop her," she whispered, "but I can't let her keep doing it either." She looked like someone who'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. "Why me?" I asked. Her answer hit like truth often does, quick and quiet. "Because you're the only one who didn't fold." We sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind whistle through blackened beams. It was one of those moments where you feel the ground shift under your feet, not with fear, but with purpose, like life is nudging you out of grief and into motion. I didn't hug her, didn't promise anything, just took the folder, nodded, and knew exactly what needed to happen next. That night, I stared at my ceiling, the roof of my truck, and couldn't sleep. Not because of the springs in the seat or the heat, because of what I knew now. Hazel had handed me the blueprint of her mother's criminal ambition, and the moment I opened that folder, I crossed a line I couldn't walk back over. This wasn't about salvaging Laurel Hill anymore. This was about dismantling the rotten scaffolding her entire little empire stood on. But that kind of fight doesn't happen with fists. It happens with patience, paperwork, and pressure in the right places. I didn't just want justice. I wanted exposure. I wanted every homeowner who paid extra dues for a pool that never got built to know where their money went. I wanted every contractor who got strong-armed into silence to see someone push back. If I was going down, I was dragging her with me, one invoice at a time. Stay with me, because the match may have been hers, but the fire, that was about to be mine. There's a certain pause that happens right before you think you're about to get fired, the kind where you mentally pack your desk before anyone says a word. That's exactly what I felt sitting across from Rhonda Clay, my supervisor at the Tennessee State Municipal Oversight Fund, as I laid out my personal connection to Azalea Ridge and slid the folder of evidence across her desk. Fraud. Embezzlement, a multi-stage land grab wrapped in HOA language and pastel blouses. I told her everything from the fire to the spray paint, the fake violations, and Hazel's leak. Her silence stretched so long, I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. But Rhonda wasn't the type to rattle. She flipped through the papers, page by page, face unreadable, then finally looked up and said, "You should have told me sooner. But I'm glad you did." And just like that, instead of being shown the door, I got handed the keys to it. Rhonda didn't just authorize me to stay on the case, she deputized me. Full audit authority, green light to freeze HOA funding, legal backup from the fund's attorneys. "We don't just tolerate fraud," she said. "We smoke it out." That day, a formal notice was sent to Azalea Ridge. Funding suspended pending a comprehensive investigation. The kind of language that makes tyrants sweat and accountants cry. It felt like the first win in weeks. I drove back to Laurel Hill lighter, almost smug, until I saw the smoke curling over the tree line. Again, not as thick as the first time, but unmistakable. My stomach dropped. I floored the gas. This wasn't a metaphor. This was escalation. The second cabin had been reduced to a smoldering shell. This one wasn't an accident either, but Darlene had leveled up her game. She'd somehow fast-tracked a demolition permit through the county clerk's office, citing structural instability and public safety concerns. I checked the date. It had been filed that very morning, rubber-stamped with no inspection, no warning. Guests who had stuck around after the first fire were gone now, bags packed, refunds demanded. My last two staffers, college kids from town, texted their resignations with apologies and emojis. I stood there, alone, ash on my boots. Permit notice pinned to a tree like a death certificate. Darlene wasn't just playing dirty, she was playing protected. She had someone inside the county working overtime to make sure every match she struck came with paperwork. That night, I sat in the shell of my office cabin, lights dim, heart heavier than the mountain fog outside. The place was silent save for the creak of scorched wood and the occasional owl who clearly hadn't gotten the memo to leave. I poured myself a finger of bourbon and started flipping through old photo albums, mostly to feel something other than rage. That's when I saw it in one of the photos. Me and Grandpa standing by the original cabin, grinning like fools. There was something in the background, a small metal sign, half covered by brush, mounted on a stone marker I'd never really noticed before. I zoomed in and squinted. Expedition Trail, Lewis and Clark, 1804. My heart stuttered. Could that be real? If Laurel Hill had ties to a national expedition route, that meant historical protection status. I jumped to my feet like a man who just found a key in a locked room. If that marker was legit, it could be the break I needed to end this madness for good. Just as hope cracked through the grief, my phone buzzed. Hazel again. "She's planning something," she whispered, voice low and shaking. "I heard her on the phone tonight. She said she wants the main structure gone by morning. Said you'll finally see reason with nothing left to salvage." I didn't ask how she knew. I didn't doubt it. I just looked out across the dark stretch of forest where that final cabin, the one Grandpa built first, the one with a fireplace we'd rebuilt brick by brick, still stood. For now, my hands clenched, my mind already racing. I knew what was coming. I just didn't know if I'd be able to stop it in time. But one thing was clear. If this was going to be our final round, I wasn't going to be the one holding the ashes again. Keep watching. What happens next changes everything. Beaver Creek's county finance hearing usually draws a crowd of 6 retirees, 2 board reporters, and 1 guy who thinks it's still bingo night. Not this time. That room was packed tighter than a church potluck during scandal season. Folks were standing, whispering, eyes darting, like they knew they were about to witness something they'd talk about for the next 20 years. Darlene waltzed in like it was her coronation. Floral blazer, white heels, pearls swinging with confidence, still clinging to her HOA queen identity like it hadn't just gone up in smoke. And then I stepped in behind the panel's desk and took my seat as the official lead investigator for the Tennessee State Municipal Oversight Fund. Her face twisted so fast you could have timed it with a stopwatch. I didn't smile. Didn't need to. The air did it for me. The moment I started my report, laying out the embezzlement, shell companies, phantom invoices, and payments to her cousin's landscaping firm that didn't even own a lawnmower, Darlene interrupted me with all the poise of a busted pressure cooker. "This is a setup," she snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "This man has a vendetta. He owns land adjacent to Azalea Ridge. This is personal." The room tensed. I didn't flinch. I let her rant. She threw around phrases like character assassination and legal overreach like confetti at a pity party. The panel chair leaned forward, calm as a Sunday preacher. "Ms. Whitmore, we are aware of Mr. Vance's property ownership. We are also aware that your HOA burned down part of it." That sentence shifted the room like wind through dry leaves. And then, as if on cue, Theodore stood up. The man had been Darlene's right hand for years, her lapdog, her gopher, her human paperweight. But something in him cracked. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fear. He cleared his throat and said, "I have a recording to submit." He placed a small digital recorder on the table and hit play. Darlene's voice filled the room, sharp, impatient, unmistakable. "I don't care how you do it, Theo. I want those cabins gone. Burn them if you have to." He'll fold once he has nothing left. You could hear a pin drop. Then you could hear 30 jaws hitting the floor. A woman in the back gasped, so loud it sounded rehearsed. And Darlene, she froze. No spin, no denial, just silence thick enough to drown in. And we weren't even done. I queued up the footage next. Security video from a hidden trail cam I'd mounted weeks ago. Wide-angle, high-res, time-stamped. There she was, Darlene, on my land. Dressed like she was headed to a picnic, pointing at the cabin with a man holding 2 red gas cans, her voice clear as a bell. "Make it fast. We don't want him seeing the flames till it's too late." The footage ended. The silence deepened. Then came the sound that marked her downfall. Murmurs. Not pity, not confusion, anger. Homeowners whispering to each other. Some stood. Others shook their heads. A woman in the front row began to cry. Darlene tried to stand, to speak, but the board chair raised his hand. "We've seen enough." What followed was swift. The panel voted unanimously to revoke Azalea Ridge's funding. Permanently, all financial operations frozen. The HOA's charter suspended pending legal restructuring. And Darlene? Her last bit of defiance evaporated the moment 2 deputies stepped forward to escort her out. "This isn't over," she shouted, voice cracking under the weight of her unraveling empire. "You'll all regret this." But even her threats felt hollow now, like cheap fireworks fizzling before they light. She ruled with garden gloves and gasoline, but forgot the wind blows both ways. And today, it blew straight through every lie she ever told. As she was led out, I caught a final glance. No pearls, no confidence, just a woman who finally learned what consequences feel like. And yet, even with her gone, I knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because sometimes tearing down a tyrant is the easy part. The hard part, rebuilding what they tried to destroy. And in that moment, standing before the ashes of her authority, I made a silent promise. I wasn't just going to bring Laurel Hill back, I was going to make it untouchable. Stick around, you'll want to see how this ends. Darlene Whitmore's mugshot hit the county bulletin board like a late-night thunderstorm. Loud, sudden, and followed by stunned silence. Charged with conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, and misuse of HOA funds, she was denied bail faster than you could say community standards. Hazel took the stand with steady hands and a cracked voice, confirming every threat, every plan, every sleepless night she'd spent in her mother's shadow. The HOA charter was dissolved. Azalea Ridge homeowners were informed their dues would now be overseen by an interim trustee until a legal restructure could take place, one with actual transparency, not just Darlene's brand of pastel dictatorship. Federal investigators were now in the mix, and let's just say the IRS doesn't like missing money, especially when it buys spa tiles and lakefront jacuzzis. Watching it all unfold, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something heavier. Relief, like I could finally exhale after holding my breath through fire. With the legal war behind me and her HOA empire in shambles, I focused on something I hadn't dared to dream about for weeks: rebuilding Laurel Hill. The first thing I did was follow up on that old expedition marker I'd spotted in the photo. Turns out my land had once served as a rest site during the Lewis and Clark trail mapping. A local historian came out, confirmed the metal plaque's authenticity, and within 3 weeks we'd secured historical protection status for the entire property. That meant no future HOA, no developer, no smiling crook with a fake wellness plan could ever touch this land again. Irony of ironies. Darlene burned the cabins, but in doing so, she helped guarantee they'd never be taken. She tried to erase us, and instead, she wrote us into history. That's the kind of full circle you don't see coming, and frankly, it was the sweetest nonverbal "I told you so" I'd ever tasted. The rebuilding started on a Monday because something about starting fresh on a weekday just felt right. I hired local, paid fair, and brought back the original crew that had helped me expand years ago. Olivia didn't just return, she doubled down. She became my business partner, handling operations with the kind of grace that only comes from surviving chaos. Hazel, she moved in with her aunt in Nashville, got accepted into Vanderbilt, and thanks to a new community fund we set up in the ashes of Darlene's empire, her tuition was fully covered. She sent me a thank you card with a picture of a treehouse she used to play in, the caption reading, "We're not our parents, we're the ones who fix what they broke." I kept it on my desk, right next to the fireproof lockbox that would change everything. See, about halfway through the cleanup, a crew member found a small metal box buried beneath the rubble of the main cabin's foundation. Charred but sealed tight, it took 2 crowbars and a stubborn streak to open it. Inside, a few black and white photos, my grandfather's pocket knife, and a letter, yellowed and folded with age, written in his handwriting. "If this survives, that means the worst has happened, but, son, I always told you, character is fireproof. If you're reading this, you've already proven me right." I sat on the porch steps and read that letter 3 times, hands shaking and eyes stinging like I'd inhaled the smoke all over again. It was the kind of moment you don't plan for, the kind that stops time. He'd seen the future somehow, not in detail but in principle. He knew something or someone might try to take what we built, but he also believed I'd hold the line. And I had. 6 months later, Laurel Hill stood taller than ever. 20 cabins, each named after native Tennessee trees, lined the lakefront. A new community center sat near the trailhead, built not as a monument to ego, but as a space for education, conservation, and connection. Theodore, now serving court-ordered community service, worked alongside volunteers to replant the wildflower beds, his clipboard replaced with a shovel. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was always the same. I should have stopped her. I told him once, "You did. Eventually. That matters." Because it did. People stumble. It's what you do when you get back up that decides what kind of person you really are. And that's a lesson we all learned together, out there under those same pines that once bore witness to fire. On the first full moon after reopening, I sat on the new porch of the rebuilt main lodge, bourbon in hand, the lake shimmering like a mirror, holding every memory we refused to let go. Across the water, the old Azalea Ridge HOA building had been turned into a public library. Talk about poetic justice, replacing ignorance with information. In the other direction, I could see the county courthouse where Darlene now waited for sentencing. Funny, isn't it? She had everything: control, money, a town too scared to speak up, and she lost it all because she underestimated a man with a ledger, a legacy, and a whole lot of receipts. The world doesn't hand out justice often, but when it does, you better believe it's worth every minute of the fight. And me? I was never after revenge. I just wanted my land, my peace, and my family's name left in one piece. And now I've got all three. And they're fireproof. So, if you've made it this far, you didn't just hear a story about cabins, HOA fines, and a woman with too much perfume and too little conscience. You heard a story about what matters, about the kind of strength that doesn't shout but outlasts. You saw how character, once tested, either cracks or hardens into something unshakable. My grandfather used to say anybody can build something. The real test is what survives when it burns. Well, Laurel Hill burned, but what rose from those ashes wasn't just a resort. It was a community, a legacy, and a reminder that truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs someone willing to carry it through the smoke. If you felt something while listening, if you've ever stood up to power and felt alone, or been pushed and chose not to fall, then this story was for you. This wasn't just about an HOA gone rogue. It was about what happens when the wrong people have power, and what happens when the right person says no. Elijah didn't fight back with fists. He fought back with facts, with grit, and with the kind of quiet integrity the world doesn't celebrate enough. The lesson? Legacy doesn't come from money. It comes from courage, consistency, and refusing to let people with loud voices write your ending. This story reminded us all, character is fireproof, but only if you protect it like it's worth more than everything you own. If this story made you feel something, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from, or better yet, share what you've stood up for. Like what this story stood for? Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We've got more real-feeling, high-stakes stories where truth meets justice and the quiet folks come out swinging. Because at QA Stories, we don't just tell tales, we let the fire speak and trust the right people are listening.